What is a swordsman? Someone who uses a sword? Someone who dedicated their life to the sword? Someone who simply just has a blade? Well, in this recent chapter of One Piece, this ancient question the fan base has been asking has been brought up once again, and in today's video, I want to break down my take on it. And if you do like the video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications. It only takes a few seconds and makes a massive difference. The thing that brought this topic back up once again was in chapter 1023. King and Zoro are fighting, and as King takes Zoro's swords, King says, "In order to fight, do you need a school or a style?" Zoro says, "I see, a killer machine, huh? Nope, good point. And you never called yourself a swordsman. Do as you like. Who knows? By the end of this, I might be tearing your throat out with my teeth. Anything to ensure I win." Now, I will say in the viz, it does make a little bit more sense, but in the scans, King says how he never understood such traditional tactics in fighting. And this sparked the whole debate again of who is a swordsman. Is there a pure swordsman, a half swordsman, and people even going as far as downplaying certain characters because of this. Now, I do want to say that in theory, I have come around to the idea of people having swords but not being technically swordsmen to some people, but I think people are using this a little bit. I do think people are using this out of context just a little bit. I spoke about it in my review of this chapter, please go watch that if you haven't, that I thought Zoro was referring to how dirty he fought, because his solution to that, or his rebuttal to it, wasn't to fight with his feet or hands. He was going to fight with his mouth, fight him, do whatever he can to beat him. In the beginning of the story in Baratie, when he fights Mihawk, he shows a lot of dignity and pride when he fights, and despite him being a pirate, he never fights anyone unfairly. And I don't even remember a lot of people he has fought that were fighting unfairly against him. On top of that fact, he fought a person that called himself a swordsman and even blew fire at him, but he didn't have anything to say about it. So I do think there are two types of swordsmen in people's eyes. In Alabasta, when Zoro is fighting Mr. One, he mentions that, don't mistake me for a swordsman. I have a lot of other weapons to dismantle you with. And in Punk Hazard, Virgo comments on how, where is his sword at? And then Monet comments on, "You're not a swordsman though." And he says, "You're right. I'll just go crack a few skulls." This is most likely a gag moment, but I just wanted to throw it in just to mention it. I do see the logic in someone saying that just because you have a sword doesn't mean you're necessarily a swordsman, but I feel like people are trying to take the logic only a few characters have, and apply it to a lot of other characters. Let's take the Marines for example. When we first see Aokiji against Zoro and I believe Sanji, he uses an ice sword and he seems to be very skilled in swordsmanship. When we see Kizaru fight Rayleigh, he matches him with a sword and can even keep up with him and in Marineford, only using his feet and his laser beams. Then there's a spread that Oda drew that has all the Marines in their younger age, and Sakazuki has a sword. These people are all skilled in all types of fighting, but you would not call them swordsmen, right? Then you have someone like Big Mom, who is probably the most weird case in all of this, because she is obviously at her strongest while using all of her utilities, including her sword, but she is still Yonko level without her sword, if you get what I'm saying. I definitely do see the logic in all of this, but in my opinion, it becomes a little bit of a problem when you try to group people in that are clear swordsmen that use a sword with most attacks we have seen, even if they have, a devil fruit or something. You have Law, who has a devil fruit, but almost all of his attacks are used with a sword. And when he is fighting Tashigi, he even kind of ridicules her on her swordsmanship, saying how, she has to get a lot better. Then you have someone like Fujitora, who he has a devil fruit, but he is literally a samurai, has a sword, and uses his sword in almost every attack he does. Then, you have someone like Shanks, who every time we've seen in the story has used his sword, and even before he lost his arm, in his early years, he used to use a sword and a short sword. He is classing with the strongest man in the world with a sword. He blocks Akainu's attack with a sword, Oda even mentioning how he has top of the class swordsmanship, and even going as far to name his blade. He has a named blade. In my eyes, there's no way he isn't a swordsman. Now, I do want to say that I think Oda is going to give him more to his tools in terms of his kit, and fighting, but I can't see anything that he's going to give him that'll make him any less of a swordsman than Law or Fujitora, who, by the way, Oda already confirmed is a swordsman. I do think there is a line between, swordsmanship and someone just with a sword, and although I don't think the panel in last chapter proved anything, it is pretty obvious to look at characters like Big Mom or Kizaru, the Marines that have swords, but also other fighting tactics, and say, okay, I can see how these are different from, you know, the Odins, Shanks, Mihawk, Vista, etc. And this will kind of segue into my next point, because it does kind of seem like I'm downplaying Mihawk a little bit by saying he's not actually the world's strongest swordsman, you know. He's only the world's strongest pure swordsman and not the strongest blade user or whatever. Everyone that knows me knows how I feel about Mihawk and where I place him, and I do think there are only a select few people that fall into this category of that weird gray area between not being a swordsman and being a swordsman. And the problem lies when people try to take that logic with characters like Big Mom or Kizaru or Aokiji and kind of slowly turn it on another character that is pretty obvious that they are a swordsman. I don't think there being people that are blade users that aren't swordsmen in the world, I don't think it takes away from Mihawk in any way, because most of the people that I mentioned, I don't even have over Mihawk whether they're a swordsman or not. I don't think you being an exception to his title automatically means you have to be, you know, stronger than him. And I'd rather you say that someone is just straight up stronger than him that is a swordsman, which has its problems in of itself anyway, as opposed to making that actual character an exception. So them being a kind of exception to his title wouldn't really change much to me. And you know, this does kind of tie into the Shanks versus Mihawk thing, but I will not talk about that right now because that is a literal whole nother topic that I can talk about. I could make a whole hour stream about it, you know, just talk about it for hours, because these type of conversations unfortunately do not end. You cannot ever get anywhere with them. Don't honestly think I'll ever make a video on Shanks versus Mihawk because, oh my goodness, man, I couldn't even imagine my comment section. A lot of people do use this to kind of, you know, downplay Mihawk in a way, saying how, oh, he only fights pure swordsmen, or he only got challenged by them. And, you know, it's possible that he lost to someone who isn't a pure swordsman, but they never took his title away, and saying how that only people who live and die by the sword, who study the sword, who make their whole life about swordsmanship, are the only people that can challenge Mihawk for the title or threaten his title. And you know, these two pieces of logic do kind of have their flaws in a way, because he slashed that white beard, he clearly doesn't care about that, and you don't have to fight literally everyone in the world to become, you know, a world's strongest swordsman, or not even to become in the world's eyes to actually be the world's strongest swordsman. In this river card, you know, it says that it applies that, you know, a lot of his journey was just training. You don't have to fight people to train, and you know, someone like Zoro can become so strong by just training. People, you know, without a doubt will say that Whitebeard is indeed the strongest man when there's no evidence that he fought every man and beat him. And I still have him as possibly the strongest character that ever lived, or at least the strongest person in his era at the time. But, you know, people look at someone like Mihawk, who literally went around the world training as much as he could, fighting as many swordsmen as he could. And I don't know where the correlation is, where they try to downplay him, because even for the story's sake, you know, I would say that Shanks is the second strongest swordsman in the world. Never fight Shanks, but he beats Mihawk and becomes the world's strongest swordsman. And you have someone like Shanks stronger than Mihawk. Wouldn't that kind of invalidate Zoro's dream in a bit, to have someone with a sword that fights fair, that maybe even, you know, does have something up his sleeve other than swordsmanship? You know, people say the conquers hockey stuff. I'm not sure on that yet, but you see Zoro fight someone in the beginning of the story who calls himself a swordsman but also breathes fire. Then you have people like Law and Fujitora that are confirmed swordsmen. When you kind of look at it from that angle, a lot of things start to change. And when I also looked at it from that angle, that's when things started to change for me as well. I started to realize that there are clear exceptions to this, but there are only a few in the world that I can think of. And people that have used a sword for almost their entire life, that only use a sword whenever we see them, and may even have other things besides, you know, just straight sword slashes that they can use. Like, as I mentioned multiple times in this video, you know, Law of Fujitora. They are swordsmen at the end of the day. But as I close this video out, please let me know how you feel about the topic. For you, is it as simple as, if you have a sword, you are a swordsman? Or do you make this kind of mental gray area where you can put characters in a category between swordsmanship and just a regular brawler or a blade user? Please let me know in the comments what you think about this video, and just any overall thoughts, anything you want me to do in the future in terms of videos. And make sure to turn on those post notifications, because I do have a video, a really cool theory I have, that is dropping probably Thursday or Friday. And if you do enjoy this video, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And until next time, peace.